Mark, first of all, let's start here. You have rejected any conclusion really that Jeffrey, your brother, committed suicide, that he took his own life. Can you walk us through why you think that?
Well, let me first make it clear that when I first heard that Jeffrey was dead from an apparent suicide, the morning of August 10th, I was having breakfast at a hotel, and the television was on CNN, and they announced it that Jeffrey was found dead of an apparent suicide. So at first, I had no reason to doubt that. He was in jail. You don't think you're going to hear something like this. He was potentially facing, a long sentence. I know he wouldn't want to live that way. So I just assumed that that was his decision to take himself out, and I accepted it. There was no reason at that point in time to question that. And then I had to get back to New York because the next morning I had to identify his body, and they were going to do the autopsy. And the autopsy was being performed by Dr. Roman, uh, the city pathologist. It was her call, her autopsy. And I had arranged to have Dr. Bodden there because I have that right to have my own pathologist witness this. And then they did the autopsy, and they both came out of the autopsy saying that they wouldn't call this a suicide because it looked too much like a homicide. So that was like, what's going on here? I just assumed they were going to walk out and say it was a suicide, and end of story. And I deal
Mm.
with my brother's demise and move on. But they were pretty clear that it didn't look like a suicide to them. And and Dr. Bodden has more experience with this than anybody. Or let me say this way: there's nobody with more experience than him. And I don't know Dr. Roman's level of experience, but she's a city pathologist. I'm sure she's seen numerous homicides and suicides. And again, they said it wasn't a suicide. They wouldn't call it a suicide.
Mm.
So that's what alerted me that something fishy is going on here. So it
When,
wasn't it wasn't like I didn't want to believe my brother took himself out, because I fully believed it
yeah.
until the autopsy.
What recourse is there for you in that situation? If you are with pathologists who are questioning the integrity of the decision, what do you do next? What are you doing now?
Well, it's what I'm doing now, is getting the word out so people come to the understanding that Jeffrey Epstein might have been killed in prison, that it wasn't a suicide. And then if that's the case, which more and more it appears that that's the case, then you have to start questioning who killed him and why, and
Mm.
who had it done, because it was probably done for some reason. And why is the Justice Department covering this up? Why have they not done a full homicide investigation?
Mm.
By calling it a suicide early on, that stops really any investigation, because in the case of a suicide, there's really very little to investigate. Like I've said before, there's two questions on a suicide. It's usually how and why. The why is not important right now, but the how is usually apparent when you find a suicide victim. They either hung themselves, they shot themselves, they poisoned themselves, they jumped from a building. So, bingo, that's your answer. There's nothing else to investigate. If this was truly done as a homicide investigation, which they didn't want to do, there'd be a lot of questions asked that they didn't ask, and a lot of things they would look at that they didn't look at. And it's because I don't think they want to look at it, because they don't want to show that it was actually a homicide.
Mm.
Because then you have to look at all the other questions: the who and who's involved, and why is the Justice Department covering this up? I mean, the fact that the two extremely qualified forensic pathologists that did the autopsy came out and said this doesn't look like a suicide; it looks more like a homicide. That's not mentioned in any report. They're ignoring that fact. They're just brushing it under the carpet. That's not transparency. They're hiding something.
Mm.
And then when Barbara Sampson, who was the chief pathologist, she called it a homicide a few days later with no explanation to anybody. I've tried to contact her a number of times. I'm the next of kin. I should have access to his medical records and everything. I haven't been able to get them. Uh, and there's all these questions and information I can't get. I can't get the PCR report, which is the pre-hospital care report that the EMTs fill out on every call they make. That's just standard procedure as a record keeping system. I tried to ask for it on the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. I was getting stonewalled. So I went to the fire department headquarters in downtown Brooklyn. I went to the desk, to the clerk who handles this stuff. And I was told that it doesn't appear in the computer records. The PCR report for Jeffrey doesn't exist there. And I have this on videotape. I tape my interaction there. So again, why is this being hidden? Why did this report disappear or be erased?
And why do you think it is, Mark?
Well, it's being covered up. His murder is being covered up, and they're trying to brush it off as a suicide. And they don't want anybody looking into it. But more and more people are looking into it now, and more facts are coming out that I didn't know before. And people aren't letting it go because no one who looks at all the information we have, nobody thinks it's a suicide at this point in time.
To what extent is it difficult to discern what is fact and what is conspiracy theory in the investigations that, as you say, many people are seemingly trying to do into the situation surrounding the death of Jeffrey, the Epstein files, so called? All of these things are fueled by conspiracy theories online. It's difficult to understand what should be believed.
Well, a fact is a fact that's provable. If you can't prove something, then it's not a fact. I shy away from speculating on things because I want to stick to just the facts because I don't want to start my own conspiracy theory, so to speak. Like for instance, when I tell you that the report doesn't appear, the PCR report doesn't appear in the fire department's records. I mean, I have a videotape of my interaction with the clerk in the fire department headquarters, and he's stating to me very clearly he can't find any record of it. There's proof. That's a fact. The fire department doesn't have that. I
And
also
that's
tried to
just
get
to check. That's the place where that would usually be. There's no confusion. There's no issue with you needing to go and check somewhere else. That is the place that you
That's
should
the
check.
place. That's the source. That's where you go to get any copy of any PCR. If you're a family member of somebody who they did a service call on, that's where you can go to get the report. Yes.
Who do you trust to investigate the cause of your brother's death fully and competently? Is there anyone?
Well, yeah, there are people investigating it now. It's people who are not associated with the government, not part of the DOJ or the Bureau of Prisons. Yeah, if they're legitimate investigators, and they come up with facts, not just opinions.
Yeah. In terms of where we have reached in the broader kind of investigation, the Epstein files has really brought this back to the fore, I think, Mark, and the president's determination that they be released, certainly initially, and that seems to have gone away. When you hear that, when you consider the investigations that are still happening into the circumstances surrounding your brother's death, how do you piece all of that together into the bigger picture?
Well, I just think that's the usual routine coming out of this administration. They say something that sounds good, and you say, "Oh, finally, they're going to do what you would expect them to do, or you would wish them to do," but then they don't do it. So that seems to be the repetition of how they operate. They make people happy by telling them what they want to hear, but there's no follow through,
Mhm.
and they're hoping people forget what they said 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But people aren't forgetting this one, which
Well,
is
that's what I was going to say.
much to their dismay. Yeah.
Yeah. There is a real concern, I suppose, among Donald Trump supporters about what may be shown, what may be demonstrated in the Epstein files. Are you familiar with the files? Did you hear Jeffrey ever speak of them or understand what they may be?
No, I have no idea what the files are that they're talking about or any list. I'm not involved with that. And
Mm.
as far as I'm concerned, Jeffrey is he's dead. So the case against him to me is moot. If there's other people involved, that has nothing to do with me. That's their problem. So I don't get involved with that. I'm just concerned about the circumstances of my brother's murder.
Yeah. Would you trust a different administration to investigate this, a different Department of Justice, for example, to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's death?
Well, yeah, but that would take some time because this
Sure.
administration is going to be here for another 3.5 years.
Yeah. You speak out pretty openly about this, Mark. Indeed, you're speaking right now. And I can't help but wonder if Jeffrey Epstein was killed in prison, which, by the way, we shouldn't overlook how complex, how difficult a thing that might be for somebody to access him in prison in order to carry out a murder, a homicide. Do you fear for your own safety at this point?
Well, let me first address the point about the prison. If Jeffrey was killed in prison, one of the things we can't find out is there were like 12 other prisoners on that tier that would not have to go and come from that tier in order to kill somebody. So we can't find out who they were and when did they get there and where are they today. because people are suggesting that somebody was planted there a few days before to do this, and then they're transferred out and they disappear into the ether. Because we were told that after the death, a number of inmates were transferred off of the ward. We don't know who or where they went. So I've been trying to get a list of who were the prisoners on the ward, when did they get there, and where are they today, so they could be tracked and see if they were real prisoners or if they were plants.
What about your own safety, Mark?
Well, I'm just being cautious.
Mm.
That's why I
Do you,
don't appear on camera ever, because I don't need to be recognized anywhere. I'm not looking for my 15 minutes of fame. That's not what this is about. This is not
mm.
about me. This is about Jeffrey.
Do you feel like, as well as that, that's a very obvious demonstration of you actively taking precautions, in fact, to keep yourself safe? That's not normal. No normal person should have to live in fear.
Well, I'm not. Like I equate it to when you cross the street, you're not afraid to cross the street, but you look both ways. It's just a matter of the difference between fear and caution.
Mm,
That's all. So
I
I'm being
understand.
cautious.
Yeah. One of the other, I suppose, difficulties people may be having right now in this moment, in this chapter of this story, is that Jeffrey Epstein has died. Ghislaine Maxwell lives, and she may be the key to information in the case and the broader context of the case as well. But they were close associates. We know that they worked together. Indeed, they were both convicted in the similar sense of the crimes that they were committing. They were accomplices in that sense. Why do you think Ghislaine Maxwell is alive but your brother has died?
I don't know. I couldn't give you an answer to that, and I don't want to speculate as to why.
Yeah. They were close associates, I suppose. So what I'm
Oh, they were
guessing at,
they
I
were
guess,
very
is
close.
yeah,
Yes,
is
they
that
were
the
very
information
close.
they had was probably shared. So I'm trying to understand if somebody was to murder your brother, why they would not murder Ghislaine Maxwell, given the information overlap.
I don't know what to tell you on that. That's not my focus.
Yeah. In terms of your focus then, Mark, how do you progress from here? Do you feel like this White House is under pressure in relation to the death of your brother to come up with answers, to provide evidence, to provide information?
Not enough pressure. That's why I'm trying to put as much pressure as possible. But more and more people are questioning this, and more people are looking into this and investigating this. And there's more information coming out, which I won't divulge now because I have to make sure it's facts and not speculation. But there's a lot of what I believe are facts coming out.
Really? So that's from the investigations that are going on. We should expect development.
Yes.
Okay. In terms of, can you give us any indication as to what sort of investigations they are that might be fruitful, or
Well,
in what
well
sort of realm?
there's people with experience in investigating, homicides and suicides that are looking into this now,
Are they
and none of
being
them are coming up saying it's a suicide
right?
so
Okay.
far.
Okay. So you feel like there's a really growing consensus actually in what's happened here.
Yes, and I think my fellow American citizens should be concerned that an American citizen might have been killed in an American prison under the supposed protection of the federal government.
Yeah.
That's a real concern for me, not just as Jeffrey's brother, but as a citizen of my country.
Yeah. Gosh, Mark, it's an experience that you're having that I'm doing my best to understand, but it is just so out of the ordinary. I think is to put it lightly. Given all that you have been through, as I say, the trial, the conviction of your brother, the fact he was imprisoned in the first place, and now where you are at, pursuing, I guess what you would say is pursuing justice on his behalf at this point. Some critics that I've read have suggested you're just doing this out of a sense of family loyalty, that this isn't sort of based on anything other than that. I guess you've spoken to the fact that you've got experts working with you. How do you address those critics, though, of which I'm sure there are many? I'm sure you're familiar with what they say.
Well, yes, Jeffrey was my brother, and I'm concerned that my brother was killed under any circumstances. And I don't want the people responsible for this to feel they just got away with this.
Yeah. Do you think you have a theory as to who is responsible?
That would be speculating. I don't want to do that now.
Sure, and I won't
But
ask
I
you
but I look at
what the theory is, but do you have
but
one?
yeah, I do have one. If you were looking at this as an investigator would, and those investigators are looking at it, you would say, okay, if he was killed, who might have killed him?
Mm.
Who would have the ability to have the DOJ, Department of Justice, have omissions in their reports. Bill Barr, who was the attorney general at the time, made that ridiculous statement that he said nobody went in or out of the tier, and that convinced him it was a suicide, completely ignoring the fact that there were people already on the tier that could have done it. If you were really investigating this as a homicide, you would have questioned all of those inmates on the tier. And we believe that was not done. You have Cash Patel, the FBI guy, just declaring it a suicide and saying a suicide when you see it. How many suicides has he seen? I mean, when I heard him say that, I couldn't believe how stupid that was. Is he a forensic pathologist? What's his expertise? And he didn't see the suicide. He didn't see Jeffrey's body. He didn't see the crime scene. He wasn't there. But all of a sudden now, it's suicide when you see it. What is he basing that on? So it's like, these are supposed to be intelligent people. And how do they think people are going to believe when they make statements like that are just what I consider to be ridiculous under the circumstances?
Yeah. You yourself were investigated, were you not, by the FBI after the death of your brother?
Oh yeah, and not just by the FBI. I mean, when it first came out and people found out that Jeffrey had a brother, most people didn't know that Jeffrey had a brother.
Mm.
I sort of half joked. I said I had 100 proctologists. Everybody was trying to look up my butt, trying to find dirt on me to link me to all that stuff, and they tried. And once they found out that I had nothing to do with that and I was clean, then they all started calling me to help them with their stories for background information. I had a laugh. First they were trying to condemn me, and now they want me to be their best buddies.
Yeah. Can I ask as well, Mark, as we've touched on in this interview, there are countless conspiracy theories and there are countless conspiracy theorists that think
Uh-huh.
they have the answers to all of this when they posit them in their YouTube videos or in their posts on social media. How does it make you feel when you see that sort of stuff?
Well, I don't pay too much attention. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there. I know in a few recent articles, I've been described as Jeffrey's the older brother. Now Jeffrey was the older of the two of us. He was 18 months older than me, so I don't know where they're getting their information from.
Mm.
I never claimed to be older than Jeffrey, so I don't pay much attention to that.
It's a good example, actually, that it's something as simple as an age, who is the oldest, and these people get that wrong. But yet they get millions of views on videos theorizing about everything else to do with the case. Their credibility is kind of shot, I suppose, at that point.
Yes, I
Would
agree with you.
would you encourage them to stop, these conspiracy theorists, to just shut up and let this play
No, if
out?
this is what they want to do, if this makes them happy, hey, maybe they'll come upon a fact that we missed. I mean, if let them keep digging. The fact that they don't believe that it was a suicide, then I'm in favor of anything they want to do because
Yeah.
they can't hurt what I'm trying to do. They can only help.
Do you work with them? Are they in touch with you?
Some have tried to be in touch with me, but no, I try to stay away from that.
Yeah, fair enough. At this point, then, Mark, here we are in 2025. I'm going to ask you a sort of philosophical question, I think, to conclude, which is, as things stand, what do you think the story, the case of your brother, what does it say about the United States in which you live?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I never looked at that question before. Well, there's a lot of things going on in this country, and not just here. It's like all over the world. I travel quite a bit, and
Mm,
there's no place that I would consider to be a perfect Eden, with no ills. It's just another story. I don't think it's. I mean, it's kind of interesting how much play this is getting, and I'm glad it is. But it's fascinating. I'm glad because it's keeping attention on it, and more people are shying away from what's being told to them and starting to look with their own eyes and saying, "Hey, this doesn't add up."
yeah.
It's like when Donald Trump said that he was never in Jeffrey's office after that woman came out and accused him of, let's say, bad behavior in Jeffrey's office, and he said that he was never in Jeffrey's office. I couldn't believe he would actually say that because we have plenty of witnesses that puts him in Jeffrey's office many times, especially back in the '90s when they were really good friends. So I was really shocked that he would make that kind of a statement.
Is it President Trump that has most to lose by the truth being told here?
I don't know if he has the most, but I do think he has something to lose. That's why I think that this is all being like covered up, and they're trying to divert attention away from this any way they can. It's sort of like a pathetic attempt.
Yeah. Mark, it's really fascinating speaking to you. I'm very grateful for your time. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining
Well,
me.
thank you for looking into this.